Tell me something a job has taught you that you will never ever forget, no matter what.
So in my last district where I taught, we needed to be at work by 8 o'clock and the students' time was 8:10. A little bizarre, but just follow me. So every day I would show up at like 6:30 in the morning. I'd beat the custodians there sometimes, and I would often stay late. Now I had 2 small children at home, and one week it was an exceptionally difficult week. After years of showing up at 6:30 every morning, I showed up at 7:30 for this week. Mind you, still a half an hour before I was supposed to show up. My principal got so mad at me by Friday. She was like, "You're coming in awfully late these days." But she's saying it to me as other teachers are actually arriving late to the job. Like actually their kids are sitting there waiting with nobody in the classroom. And that's when I realized when you do extra, it becomes an expectation, and I never showed up early for work again or stayed late.
If you can survive fast food customers, you can survive pretty much anything in life. Like if you started working in fast food at a younger age and started dealing with that stuff early on, I don't want to sound like that guy, but it literally will toughen you up, whether you like.
Oh God, that anyone who works in tech support, they need to be appreciated way more, because I don't even work in tech support. I work at a pizza place, but an older person called me. They're like, "Hey, I want to order a pizza." I'm like, no problem. How may I help you? He's like, "Well, I need help. Like I need to order it online." I'm like, "Hey, what do we want to do here?" He's like, "How do I turn my computer on?" I was like, "Press the power button." He did that. Then he's like, "What do I do next?" I'm like, "You need to click on a browser." He said, "Who's Bowser?" I said, "Browser." He's like, "What's a browser?" I explained to him what a browser. I just press the G. Press the G. It stands for Google. He got there, and then I'm like, "Now just type in our pizza place." He managed to get to 4 different pizza places that weren't ours. Then he's like, "I just pressed a hyperlink." So I'm like, "You know what a fucking hyperlink is, but you don't know what a browser is." And then he's like, "You know what? I don't even want pizza." I'm like, "I don't want to work here anymore."
If you are in a job where you're not getting promoted and people that are less capable than you are getting promoted ahead of you, it's because management expects you to leave, because they know when you're too good for them, and they've had other employees like you in the past, and they're not going to promote you and invest in you if they plan on you leaving in the next 2 years. And also they know that they're dysfunctional, and you as like an employee probably don't see all the dysfunction. You probably see a lot of it, but you don't see all of it. And they know that once you are in a management role, you'll see a lot of the dysfunction and you'll be disgusted and you'll leave. So I've literally had managers be like, well, like I've asked them like, well, why did this person get promoted ahead of me? And they've been like, well, you're not going to stay here. Like they literally think about this stuff, and they know when you're too good for them.
That they don't care. They don't care that you got in a wreck on the way to work. They don't care that your babysitter didn't show up. They don't care that you just bought a house. This is coming from someone who sat on the executive board with the CEO, with the COO, with all of the higher ups. They don't care. They don't care what you have going outside of work. It is about the result. It is about the deliverable. And the sooner you remove the emotion out of the work that you do, the further that you can go. Because when you start to think that they care if you had a bad day, then you give yourself an excuse to have a bad day. When you think that they care that you're doing really well in your personal life, you give yourself an excuse. When you remove the emotion, you will go further. Show up. Be passionate about the work that you are doing. If you are, if you don't care about the work you're doing, do the bare minimum, but take the emotion out of it and stop people thinking that people care. It wasn't until I understood this that I doubled my salary and was able to get promoted. It sounds cold.
If you're thinking, there's no way that someone hasn't thought of this. Like, this is definitely like, there must be a reason there isn't. They didn't. No one thought of it. There is no reason it's being done that way. The only reason it's being done that way is one guy one time had a louder enough mouth in a meeting, and so now it's done that way. Challenge. Be graceful and humble while you challenge, but challenge things, because the obvious problems are usually the actual problems, okay? Go fix the world. But you know what? Let's maybe stop feeding the corporate elite, okay? Can we start like maybe I don't know, like a Reddit sub where we just share all the corporate bullshit that we're all learning? Because I have some intel I'd like to share in a private, secured location. Okay.
Coworkers are not your friends. They're just coworkers. Stop telling them your business, showing them pictures. Now, sometimes you might find a cool ass coworker and y'all mesh well.
Honey, come up in here so I can give you this sugar honey iced tea. Now, I have learned when it comes to these jobs, honey, always get your time off approvals in writing. If you can't get it in an actual physical letter, get it via text, via email. It doesn't matter. Let me tell you, I'm in the medical field and I had to go on a temporary disability leave. My job literally tried to fire me, replace me, and thought when I came back I wasn't going to notice. Honey, they tried to make up so many lies on me, but I had my receipts. Baby, it was so bad, they didn't even want to even go to court with me, honey. They signed me a check and just asked me how much did I want.
This is going to sound fucking ridiculous, but please remember this. Next time you are on a job interview and it's over and they ask you, do you have any questions for us? Ask them, does everyone get paid on time? I'm really embarrassed to admit this, but my last job, I worked at an international chain restaurant for 2.5 years, and I would say that easily 30% of my paychecks bounced the entire time I worked there. And not just me, but everyone who worked there. And sometimes it would take our boss so long to give us our replacement checks that we'd get our next paycheck and then that one would bounce too. The longest I ever went without getting paid was over a month and a half. And super fun fact, I don't know how many of you know this, but every time you deposit a paycheck that bounces, your bank fines you. I don't know how it's legal, but I have US Bank, and every time my paychecks bounced, they charged me $17. My coworkers with Bank of America, I think they got charged like $12 or $13 every time. So ask, does everyone get paid?
Don't be scared to check that person that acts like a supervisor even though they're not. At my second job, there was this hateful girl that walked around acting like she was the boss, being mean to everyone, even though she wasn't a boss. And so I gave her the 3-strike rule. The first time she did it to me, I let it slide. I'm like, maybe she's having a bad day. Second time, I gave her that look like, okay, now you got one more time. Third time, had to check her. She told me to go do something. I said, well, let me finish this first and I'll go do it. She said, no, do it now. And got a tone. So in front of everybody, I'm like, just because you're sleeping with the manager doesn't mean you are one. You're so worried about me and what I'm doing, you need to be worried about if your fiance knows that you're cheating. She looked at me, walked away, started crying. Never said a word to me since. I'm a nice, happy, bubbly guy, but don't get it twisted. I got more tea than the British monarchy, and I'm not the one to fuck with.
You're just another number in the payroll for them. You're not that special. Don't do more than you've been paid for. They won't appreciate it, and they'll just give you more because they know you can do it. You don't ask, you don't get. If you want help, you need to ask for it and make sure you back yourself. This means putting things in writing. So tomorrow, when somebody, probably your manager, tries to scapegoat you and blame you for why certain things haven't been done, you can back yourself to say, well, I actually asked for support and here it is. Even if you had a conversation with a colleague who's a really good friend and they've confirmed something for you, make sure you back it up in writing. If it's not written, it didn't happen. No job is worth your mental well-being, your health, and a disruption of your work.
Their teeth regularly. Did you know that if you're someone who doesn't get cavities and you start dating someone who is susceptible to caries, they can transfer that gross bacteria into your mouth and you can start getting cavities? Did you know that the same bacteria that causes periodontal disease has been found in the deceased brains of patients with Alzheimer's? Periodontal disease is also linked to heart disease, diabetes. It can exacerbate those very dangerous and life-threatening medical conditions. I have seen so many college-age students, 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old boys, men who don't brush multiple days in a row. Did you know when you do get periodontal disease, your teeth can fall out? You can't regrow your teeth. We have to numb you, scale down on your root. It is painful. It is not fun, and your breath smells very bad. If you do not know how to brush and floss your teeth, please call me. I will teach you and I will make sure you get access.
During an on-the-job training for managers, the trainer, who had been doing this sort of thing for 10 years, told us this. He said, wherever you work will always be willing to take what you give. But at the end of your life, you're not going to think, I'm so glad I gave so much to that job. Know your boundaries, know your limits, make sure your life is...
So, 2 things. 1, if you break a glass or like a plate or something, when you sweep up the little broken pieces, you should put them in like a grocery bag and like triple bag it and tie it really, really tight so that the person taking out the trash or the garbage person doesn't get cut on glass. 2, I have never been the one to do this, but I've seen it done a bunch of times.
If someone throws up, you should pour coffee grounds on it because it can help soak it up so that it's easier to like sweep up, and then it'll also cover up the smell a little bit so that you don't throw up. Also, to clarify the coffee one, my boss would always pour coffee on top of throw up, then sweep it up into like a grocery bag, get rid of that, and then mop it with all.
A few, because the jobs I worked at, they be having me fucked up. First off, fuck a 2 weeks notice, especially if that job don't respect you. Fuck giving a 2 weeks notice. And don't come in my comments talking about, oh, you need to be professional. They don't ever give you a notice if they're gonna fire you or if they're gonna reduce your hours. Like, fuck that shit. Secondly, you are allowed to request off, and don't ever let these jobs make you feel bad for doing so. They give you time off for a reason. And if you request a day off for something important and they don't give it to you, take the day off anyway. Especially if you gave them an ample amount of time, take the fucking day off. Like, you gave them a month in advance or so to figure out the schedule. It is their job to figure it out. Don't let them guilt trip you into coming in. And lastly, be careful around your coworkers, because just because y'all work together does not mean they're your fucking friend.
So as a manager, my team could 100% function without me. And that's how it should be. I, however, cannot function without my team. That is the power dynamic in every workplace, and managers would do well to remember that. There is no hierarchy. They hold the power. And believe you me, if they all band together and tell you to sod off, there is nothing you can do about it. So treat them with respect, treat them like people, listen to their ideas, and it will all be...
All right, if you work a 9-to-5 job Monday through Friday and you take a 15-minute shit on each of your 8-hour shifts, at the end of the year, you will have one 40-hour paycheck that you have gotten paid for taking a...
Don't ever become too reliable. You ever realize that the laziest motherfuckers at a job can call out whenever they want? But you, the hardest person working there, can't even call out one time without getting your job threatened or you getting the write-up. And honestly, that's because you make their jobs easier, while your lazy coworker isn't even a factor. And if you let a manager or supervisor play you, they will play you. For example, you ever ask a supervisor for the day off and they say, yeah, but only if you could find somebody to cover your shift. Like, wait, hold on, ain't that your job? Why am I finding somebody to cover my shift?
Never forget.
I used to work at a secondhand clothing store as a buyer for a long time. I know a lot of random facts about clothing. This might be interesting to people who thrift or buy secondhand. It may be just random, but here we go. Certain clothing brands date their clothes. Brands that I know do this are Madewell, J. Crew, Athleta, Gap, Old Navy, Banana Republic. For example, on the inside tag of this Madewell dress, there is a stamp that says SU13. That means summer 2013. Next, for vintage clothes, the best way I've found to date by decade is generally with the country of origin. Depending on the decade, different countries were leaders in clothing manufacturing. I can do another video on which countries are which decade. Sterling silver jewelry will always be stamped with a 925, and that's because sterling silver is 92.5% silver. Real stones, semi-precious or precious, will be cold against your face, but costume pieces will be warm/room temp.
Number 1, performance reviews don't matter. Employers often tell employees that to get a raise or promotion, they need to have a good performance review. That's false. You see, the company has already budgeted compensation months, if not years ago, and this pot of money was preset by a budget committee or an executive committee. Fact is, there'll be very little variance between people of the same pay grade, so employers are able to manage their costs effectively. Number 2, performance can be massaged to look like whatever executives want it to look like. It's like painting circles around a target. Number 2, studies and law firms have shown that HR is not your friend. Human resources looks after the interests of the employer, not the employee. Have a harassment issue with top management? Good luck having HR take your side. Number 4, hard work isn't worth it. That's not what leads to success. Going the extra mile just leads to mental health problems. Because studies have shown that management subconsciously gives opportunities to those.
You do not matter. No matter how much you think you're not replaceable because of how good you are at your job, they do not care. You are 100% replaceable. They can fire you and hire someone else to do your job for less money. Only do the work that is in your job description. If you're doing more work than what's in your job description, you're not being a good employee. You're providing extra labor to a company that's going to pay you the same regardless. Your coworkers are not your family. Because at the end of the day, your family is going to choose their paycheck before you. The biggest thing that every job has ever taught me is that working for someone else will not provide me with...
You will always work with a peer or a boss who you don't like, and probably always going to be a peer or a boss who doesn't like you either. Organizational development research tells us that one of the biggest reasons people fail at the workplace is because they refuse to acknowledge or resolve interpersonal conflict. You do not have to like everyone you work with. You don't have to be friends with everybody that you work with, but you do have to find a